Whoo! Welcome to On the Pen Live. A recap of Obesity Week 2024 and a profoundly heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you that made this week happen. This was a tremendously special week for me, for On the Pen, and for the entire community. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. That's why you're here. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Compound. That's what we talk about. And that's what was talked about all week at Obesity Week. And tonight, in a special edition of On the Pen Live, I'm going to give you a recap from a very personal perspective on how the show went, how it differed maybe from what I thought it would be, what I learned, and what I think you might like to know. So before we get into it, if you're new to the channel, I'm Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro, On the Pen. This is a community that we have built over the last 2 years for anyone who is on a medication to treat the chronic disease of obesity. And we talk about all the news surrounding these medications. We talk about the past history of obesity medicine. We talk about the current state of obesity medicine, and we talk about the extremely bright future of obesity medicine. And Obesity Week is one of those places where the future is highlighted. And it was a pleasure to be able to attend this year's obesity conference in San Antonio. The Obesity Week is put on by a society called the Obesity Society, which was started in the 80s. And I had the wonderful privilege of sitting down at a dinner with Row, CEO Z Ritano, some of their Row team rowers, as they call them, Dr. Beverly Chang, Dr. David Allison, among them you may be familiar with. And Dr. David Allison has really been part of the Obesity Society since its inception. And hearing about the early days of the Obesity Society and the fight to get obesity recognized as a disease, not only by the world. At that point, it was just developing a consensus within the medical community that obesity caused metabolic issues that needed medical intervention. And the Obesity Society for the last 40 years has been pushing to expand knowledge and understanding and shift societal thinking on the disease of obesity, and to push medicine towards developing treatments that may one day see the eradication of obesity. And some of the most interesting information that we got this past week were from the SURMOUNT trials and SELECT trials. In the SURMOUNT trials, we learned that 94% of people who were treated with tirzepatide, the active ingredient in Mounjaro and Zepbound, who are pre-diabetic, did not develop diabetes. In the SELECT trial, which didn't even go to the top doses of Wegovy, that's semaglutide for weight loss, the SELECT trials were a heart study to get an indication for heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. In that study, we learned that patients didn't even dose up to the top dose of 2.4 milligrams necessarily. A good number of them did, but they weren't required to. Some stayed on very low doses. Some even paused treatment during that trial. So it wasn't even a trial that maxed out the top dose. But in this trial, we saw 87% reduction in development of type 2 diabetes. Just astounding to think about the fact that we could even be looking at a world where type 2 diabetes is no longer a thing. And so there's a lot of hope shared at this conference. Like I said, I want to get into a little bit of the personal side of what I learned and some of the things that I gleaned from this show. I gave you a little bit of a history of the Obesity Society. And last year, there was a lot of news that was broken because there was a lot of data that was coming out last year around this time. There wasn't as much this time. We, of course, brought you some information on Viking Therapeutics, VK2735. We did see a poster presentation. You can catch an image of that over at OnThePen.com in an article where they gave the rundown on VK2735, which is an injectable, a weekly injectable, and it's also an oral daily pill. And they gave us some really interesting data on the oral pill, really high API, 100 milligrams a day, but at that dose, there was a significant amount of weight loss in just a 28-day period, over 5% weight loss when adjusted for placebo. And just amazing numbers. AstraZeneca told us about a small molecule pill that they're developing in phase 1 trials. People saw over 5% weight loss with that in 28 days. And so you just see the future of these medications is extremely bright, and really oral formulations were sort of the star of the show. The other star of the show were just more medications that are coming out that are co-agonists. For me, a lot of the sessions that we attended were things that I was already familiar with from the extent of what's maybe pertinent to the patient community, which is who watches OnThePen. So there was a sort of a lack of breaking news, but one of the most exciting things that I got to do was I got to sit down and chat and get to know some of the people face to face that we've gotten to know over the course of the last 2 years doing OnThePen. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the experience that I had. So I can't talk about Obesity Week without thanking these ones. This is my mom, Wendy, and my sister, Ann Hambone. As some of you may remember her. Ann and my mom accompanied me to the Obesity Week in San Antonio, flew down there with me, helped to videotape, helped to facilitate conversations, and just kind of have their ear to the ground for me. These two gals, I cannot say enough good things about. Very, very blessed and very fortunate to have such a wonderful support system in my family. So thanks to Hambone, thanks to my mom for attending the show. The first day that I was there, the first interaction that I had was with this guy here. You may remember this guy. This is Zachariah Ritano. He is the CEO of Row, who is a sponsor of OnThePen Live and OnThePen, the Weekly Dose podcast. And it was just such a pleasure to be able to chat to Z face to face, to learn about more about his story. And you know what was so profound to me is Z has such a genuine interest and respect and admiration for what we're doing at OnThePen. And I was just able to sort of bend his ear. You know, of course, Row is a company that he started several years ago and has grown into one of the largest telehealth companies in the world. He is somebody who very much has a compassion for people and a desire to help connect people with frictionless access to doctors and the medications and treatments that can help people achieve what they want to achieve in life. And there's no greater story about being able to rediscover and achieve what you never thought possible in life than the story of GLP-1 medications. I mean, they're just absolutely everywhere you turn, they're changing people's lives. And so it's such a joy to be partnering with Row. Of course, they helped out a little bit with getting us down there, or getting me down there, I should say. And so thank you to Row. Thank you for the wonderful dinner and getting the chance to meet some of the real pioneers of obesity medicine. It was such a joy to meet them and to spend some time one-on-one with Z and just learning from Z. This was the second person I met. This is Madison Muller, who has been a great friend of OnThePen and our entire GLP-1 community. She is a health reporter from Bloomberg. Both Z and Madison have episodes of OnThePen Live where they've been on our show, done interviews. Madison is absolutely one of the best and brightest in covering GLP-1 content from the patient perspective. Not many people are interested in telling stories of what's going on in the patient world and how the ever-changing landscape of GLP-1s, especially as it relates to accessibility, insurance coverage, and things like that, impacts people on a personal level. And Madison, at different points in her coverage of GLP-1s, has been willing to tell those stories, to reach out into the community, to get the stories and tell them to the world. Madison is a huge asset to the GLP-1 community and such a great-hearted person. It was an absolute pleasure to meet Madison. Of course, this guy shows up a couple days later. This is Dr. Spencer Nadolski. Dr. Spencer was an absolute treat to meet. Just such a good guy. I got the chance to spend some time with Dr. Spencer, sitting down and just talking about the current state of accessibility of medications, what the future may hold for accessibility, and some of the things that need to happen to increase accessibility, and just hear more about his passion for what he's doing, and his project, of course, starting his own metabolic wellness clinic. And I'm so excited to hear more about that from him as that sort of comes online. But just so great to connect with Dr. Spencer. You can tell it was just one kind of amazing encounter after another. I got to sit down with Dr. Beverly Chang, which is an interview that I'm going to bring to you here in a couple of minutes. Dr. Beverly Chang has also been on the show. She is a world-renowned obesity medicine specialist. She serves on the advisory board of Novo Nordisk and a key player at the Obesity Society. Also a medical advisor to Ro, because what I've learned about Ro in my time dealing with them is they employ the best of the best at all levels of their company. I mean, just meeting some of the people that are involved there, it was just one person that was just mind-blowingly intelligent, but not only intelligent, compassionate. Just one after another, I was introduced to different people on the Ro team. And so Dr. Beverly Chang is an advisor on the medical side for Ro. And you just know that with minds like that, the future of that company and the patients who are in their care are in such good shape. So those are some of the meetings that I got to make. So wonderful to get to know everybody. I want to just kind of fly over, and I'll bring you a couple individual videos in the days and weeks to come on some of the data that was shared that's pertinent to this audience. But the first day was very interesting. Not a whole lot went on. The first day, we were just kind of getting our bearings and trying to plan out where we would be and when we would be and how we could kind of work in some of the things that we wanted to work in during the show. It was very much a networking focused show. I got the chance to sit down and meet, of course, everybody that we talked about here. There were other individuals that we'll be introducing you to later on in some interviews. Very difficult week to get people to sit down for an interview because everybody is so tremendously busy with the sessions. They're either presenting, attending dinners, lunches, all those things. So we've definitely got some really great contacts that are going to be able to come on the pen and bring you some really cool information, some of the real movers and shakers in obesity medicine. But the first day was just kind of getting our bearings. The actual day was, the first half was travel, early morning travel. And then by the afternoon and evening time, people started to arrive. It was very interesting to sort of be recognized by people, and they, hey, we watch OnThePen in our clinic. We send our patients to OnThePen so that they can get all the latest and greatest information. It was just a real eye opener to know that the medical community has a tremendous amount of respect for OnThePen and our community. If your doctor sent you to OnThePen, drop it in the comments of this video. I'd be interested to hear from you. But that was very interesting the first day, just having some folks recognize us and call out the work that we're doing and the importance of it. In the evening, the show floor opened up, and I've been to many trade shows before, but this one worked a little bit differently. So of course it had booths like you saw in the opening video. But one of the very interesting things that I thought was that they called it the, let me play this kind of while I talk through it. One of the interesting things that I thought was that they don't call it the trade show floor. They call it the poster hall. And the poster hall is sort of what it sounds like. There are literally rows and rows of posters. And on these posters are basically a smattering of different studies that different researchers, universities, companies have put together. I'm going to be bringing you videos on some of the most interesting ones that I saw. But the poster hall had opened up. And of course, there's the booths like you're used to seeing anywhere. So we stopped by the booths and had a chance to to just peruse those, get some good information. And it was just very, very interesting. One of the most interesting things that I saw in the entire show was from a company, and we're going to be bringing you an interview with the CEO of that company after their earnings call, which takes place in the next couple of days. So that we had the interview all lined up, and unfortunately the CEO got caught on the tarmac on the way home and wasn't able to join us. But we're getting that rescheduled for probably sometime next week or the week after. But the poster hall was very interesting, and we're going to bring you the CEO of a company that's working on something that is an absolute game changer in obesity and especially type 2 diabetes. So very, very excited about that. The second day was just hard to wrap your arms around. There were sessions going on everywhere. I sat in on a session about the long-term use of GLP-1 medications. This was a couple hour long session, which was very fascinating to hear clinicians talk about some of the studies that are being done in various clinics about the long-term use of anti-obesity medications. Of course, they haven't been around for a tremendous amount of time, at least the GLP-1s, but just very interesting data that we're going to be pulling out of the discussion on the long-term use of these medications. I had another person that I got to sit down with that reminded me in the video was Dr. Mike Albert, who we'll be sitting down with and chatting a little bit more about, just our take on the conference and everything. We'll be bringing that to you in the next couple of weeks as well. But yeah, that second day was just full of information. In that morning session, there was a session on the SELECT trials, and I kind of teased a little bit earlier what was baked into that conversation. It was not necessarily new information, but lots of drill down information about the specifics of the trial. And if you want to check out the article, sorry, I just hit the wrong button. If you want to check out the article, you can go to OnThePen.com, where we dropped a couple of articles on some of these things throughout the week. But the SELECT trial update brought with it some very interesting data. Some of the main points were, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that with the SELECT trials, patients did not have to dose up. It was a 4-year study, so it was the longest study of a GLP-1. And in that study, they wanted to keep patients on the program. So it was more important that a patient stayed at a tolerable dose than it was to max them out at 2.4. And so that was very interesting, because all this data that sort of spills out from here is data that, arguably could have been better, because many of these data points are dose dependent. Not all of them, but some of them are dose dependent. So if you up the dose, the idea is that you see a little bit better benefit. Of course, that's the case with the weight loss. But the interesting thing is that despite not having to max out on the 2.4 milligram dose over this 4-year trial, patients, no matter the dose that they were on, maintained their weight loss in that 4-year period, so provided they stayed in the study and on the medication. So that was really great news. There was a reduce of not just MACE events, major cardiovascular events, but there was a significant reduction in all-cause mortality. The other interesting thing that they extrapolated this is from this study is that after a 4-year study, the rates of suicide and self-injury in this SELECT trial for both placebo patients and patients on semaglutide were statistically the same. And so there was no indication that there was an increased risk for suicidal ideation or self-injury, etc. So that was really, really great information that sort of slaps in the face of some of the negative things that you hear in the press. And so again, while the SELECT trial data wasn't new, it was very fascinating to get some of the newer information or some of the drill down information from that study, where we can sort of extrapolate some meaningful data about the use of semaglutide. The other thing that we learned about that day was AstraZeneca's AZD 5004. That's their latest sort of answer to the growing demand for GLP-1s is they're working on this small molecule pill. And in the data that they shared that at the symposium, 5.8% weight loss after 4 weeks in diabetic patients. So a huge weight loss. And again, this one's a pill, and so very scalable. They also announced that they're working on a promising long-acting amylin analog, just like CagriSema or eloralintide from Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, respectively. And then they're looking at combining that potentially with another injectable that they have, which is a GLP-1 glucagon agonist. So they would be creating a triple agonist of GLP-1, glucagon, and amylin. And so AstraZeneca came to play at Obesity Week. They came in hot and really showed that they intend to compete in a really meaningful way in the obesity space. Now, that day, it was like by the afternoon, all of the activities had caught up with me, and I actually thought I was coming down with something, and just sort of crashed hard in the afternoon for about an hour, and then went and had dinner with our friends at Roe, where, like I said, I got to sit down with some of the pioneers of the Obesity Society and just learn about the history and these doctors and medical professionals who have given their life to the advancement of the treatment of obesity. And not only that, but they have moved the needle so far in 40 years. You know, one of the eye-opening things for me was that I learned that it wasn't until 1994 that they learned about the hormone leptin. And it's just amazing to think that prior to 1994, like I was almost 10 years old at 1994, and leptin is a key hormone that basically helps you feel full. And they find that in patients who are metabolically unwell with type 2 diabetes or obesity, that hormone is dysregulated. But it was only 1994, and it was only because of the work done at the Obesity Society to push this stuff forward that we even knew that. So to think that in the 40 years that they've been around, we have not only evolved from not just believing basically that obesity was a lifestyle choice to treating it as a disease, to now having treatments like semaglutide and tirzepatide, which are changing the game for all of us. That's why this community is so important, because this is all still relatively new. So to gather with like-minded people who have similar experiences, shared a similar journey, is just so important. The next day was sort of the last meaningful day of the conference, and I sat in on a couple of really interesting talks, very scientific, very focused on heavy science. So it was very sort of hard for me to keep up with some of this stuff. But what we learned was that Fractal Health is coming up with a treatment that is an endoscopic treatment. We've talked a little bit about it here on the channel, but an endoscopic treatment that basically revitalizes the cells in the duodenum, which can really help to almost reverse high glucose numbers in type 2 diabetics, and something that they could potentially pair with treatment of GLP-1 medications or use perhaps in maintenance. The other therapy that they're working on, we've covered a little bit here. I kind of called it the GLP-1 and done, but it's more of a long-acting sort of replacement of islet cells. It's the science behind it is super complicated, but it's basically a gene therapy that allows your body to produce a GLP-1 in a way that has results that are very similar and even better than semaglutide. And so this is sort of like a one and done treatment for GLP-1. So we'll definitely want to be exploring that one a little bit more, because that to me is one of the most interesting things that's happening in the space, because it's an approach that no one else is taking. Everybody's coming up with these versions of these medications that are, GLP-1, GIP, glucagon, and just sort of co-formulating these things, amylin. But they're coming at it from what is going on biologically that we may be able to fix so that somebody doesn't have to take a medication for their whole life. So that was very interesting. We learned a little bit more about caglarinotide, which is the amylin agonist from Novo Nordisk. Caglarinotide, what they're learning is that these medications, GLP-1 and amylin agonists cross the blood-brain barrier. And there was talk about how the different cells in the hypothalamus have receptors for amylin and some for GLP-1, and some have receptors for both. And so there's all these things going on in the cells of the brain that help to lead to a reduction in energy intake. And so that was a highly scientific one. I'm not going to lie. I understood probably about 10% of what they were talking about, but it was really, really fascinating to see that these people who are just absolute geniuses working on this stuff are just continuing to push the envelope of understanding of the pathways that they can use to treat obesity. And man, it was just an overwhelming thing to be a part of as a representative of the community. And I mean, I can't express enough how thankful I am that you all have given me the platform to do what we do here at OnThePen, because this has been the joy of my lifetime professionally, to be able to do this. And it would be nothing without the community. It's all about the community. And I'm so thankful that you all have believed in what we're doing here so much that I can go do things like this. It was just a tremendous, tremendous honor to be there. And so we'll be covering a lot of these in little side videos over the course of the coming days and weeks. But I wanted to give you a rundown of the week and what we kind of experienced. Of course, if you ever go to San Antonio, our last day there was Election Day, a very weird day to be away from home. But it was very cool to be there with my mom and sister. We went to the Tower of the Americas, I believe it's called, big kind of Space Needle looking tower there in San Antonio, right near the convention center, and just kind of enjoyed some time up there at the end of our trip. And gosh, I got about 20,000 steps in a day. So I'm hoping that you ever get home from travel and it's like you're just kind of retaining a lot of water weight. I read a study on that at one point, that airline travel has some sort of mechanism that does that to your body. You retain a little water weight. So I'm going to give it a couple of days, and I'm going to jump on the scale and hopefully to see some really, really great movement in that direction too. So wanted to give you a rundown on that. I also wanted to bring you tonight a special interview with Dr. Beverly Chang. Dr. Beverly Chang sat down and let me bend her ear a little bit about the Obesity Society, about her connection to it, and just kind of about what her thoughts are as the Obesity Society has evolved and more press has become a part of kind of an element to the Obesity Society. And now somebody like me being the first real, kind of independent journalist or blogger type podcaster to be able to cover Obesity Week, and just what her thoughts are and what I can do to be a better content creator and information sharer. And so we sat down with Dr. Chang, and I'm so excited to bring you this interview with her. She is one of a kind, just the sweetest gal, and obviously extremely, extremely intelligent. So tonight's hot channel is Dr. Beverly Chang. Without further ado, here she is. Dr. Chang, thank you so much for sitting down with me again in person.
Yep. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Good. It's so nice to see you. It's so fun to meet people in person that I've met through the show or whatever, but I never met in person. So it's great to meet you.
Yeah, I feel like so many people have communities online and you feel like you know them. When I first met you, you went in for a handshake and I hugged you. Because it's like,
I've gotten that a lot this week. It's like you feel like you know people.
Yeah, and
right.
I think that's one of the benefits of social media that we don't always capture.
Right. I love it. I had similar meetings with people I feel like I know this person and so respect you, and so does our OnThePen community. And so one of the things I wanted to just chat with you about, obviously this is our first Obesity Week. It's the first time we've ever done anything like this. And so I didn't really know what I was getting into. So I got to be honest, the first day I was pretty overwhelmed with how much there is, and then also like what's going to impact the patients. Like what does the OnThePen community want to hear? Because so much of what I do is just trying to take data that's meant for people like you, medical professionals, obesity specialists, or investors, because that's where the data sort of flows from, and turn that into something that's patient-centric, something that means something to the patients. I would like to know from you, just if you can recall, like how many of these Obesity Weeks have you attended? And what are kind of some of the things that get you excited when you come to these shows?
Yeah, I think I've been going almost every year for the past 5 or 6 years now. And it's big, right? It's tremendous. And I think you get that sense of scale more so for me because I come every year and you can see how far it's grown. And I think you hit it on the dot where you have like investors, you have clinicians, you have patients, you have reporters, you have people trying to understand the science and translate that to a bigger world. And that is what really excites me because it means the world is paying attention. Before, it used to just be like this little community of doctors and scientists.
A little bubble.
A lot of scientists too, because we still didn't fully understand the disease of obesity and we didn't quite get the treatment, like the nail on the head for treatment. And so there were still a lot of talks of like the mechanism and this hormone goes up, this hormone goes down, but what do we actually do about it? And then slowly we've been able to translate that into something that's actually impactful. And as you know now, estimates are looking at the industry as a $130 billion industry. So lots of players are paying attention. Investors, biotech, pharmaceuticals are trying to figure out, honestly, probably how do we get a little piece of that $130 billion, which really puts us in the most important position, I would say you, Dave, in translating the science there and kind of being true to what the mission is, which is really patient care. And how do we best improve and optimize outcomes for people?
And you bring up an interesting point there, because it's always a little bit tricky when you're just a guy on TikTok or YouTube and no medical background. So one question that I would pose to you as an expert in obesity medicine is, what can I do as a creator to maybe sort of toe that line effectively where I'm giving good information but leaving it's sort of gets it to be a gray area, and I never want to be perceived as a medical authority, but more of a news and information. Like, it's just a difficult line to walk sometimes. So what can myself or creators like me do to sort of make sure we maintain that space?
That's an interesting point, because when you look at what's out there, there's a little bit of a difference between information and education. I say this all the time, that information is not education. Information is when you just put the data out there. There's not much context. You're not telling anyone how to interpret it. And you're trying to almost be as objective as possible. Whereas education really puts in more of that, here's my perspective, this is the context, this is how it fits in, this is where this expert individual puts their opinion forth. And so figure out where you want to be along that spectrum is where I think creators have to figure out on their own.
It's a difficult line to walk sometimes, and you definitely see people all over the spectrum. Because especially TikTok is really, really, really noisy with people pushing compounded medications and telehealth platforms, and it gets very sketchy very quick. And so I always want to maintain that differentiation of information, yes, but really what we're trying to do is empower patients, right, our community, to just have more confident and informed conversations with their medical team.
Yeah.
And so obviously information can help do that, but then you're going to your doctor for the education piece.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to separate it out. I would say too that it's good to just have an open mind. So maybe two principles: keep an open mind and pay attention to your gut feeling. Right? If something seems a little suspicious, I get that all the time. Seed oils or something like that. Feel a little suspicious about it. But I'm also very humble about it because I've never done a deep literature dive on all of the seed oils.
Sure.
So I am open to perhaps some studies demonstrating benefit, harm, what have you. I just personally don't have the time to dive into all of the nuance and formulate my own opinion just yet. So I'm not ready to put judgment there.
Sure.
And so if you're a person consuming all of this information, you're Googling, you're TikToking, you're on X, and you're looking at all of the information about weight medicine or weight loss medications, the best that I can recommend is collect that, bring it back to someone you trust, bring it back to a medical professional who has expertise in this area, and hopefully they have enough of an open mind to discuss all of the nuance with you.
I think what I'm starting to get a bigger grasp of here at this show, having just sat through a big lecture on the select trials, there were 17,000 people involved in that trial.
Yeah.
And you think about I think it was like maybe under 2,000 patients.
Yeah.
But it took 17,000 people to get the data that we got from select. And I was blown away by just that number, just the magnitude of medical professionals that it took and data crunchers, all the people involved to accomplish that. So, yeah, getting good clinical data is really important.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work on the biotech pharmaceutical end to do those clinical trials, to get us that we call level 1 evidence, as strong as possible. Really can trust what the results are, and it's a huge investment.
Well, thank you so much. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much for giving some more time to OnThePen. I'm sure they'll be super excited to hear from you again, and hopefully we can have you back on the show again sometime soon.
Anytime.
All right, nice to meet you again.
Nice to meet you.
Dr. Beverly Chang with a delightful conversation. She is just so stinking smart. Was such an honor to spend some time with her and get to learn from her. And again, somebody who's been involved with the Obesity Society for a long, long time and pushing, like any societal movement that has happened in the last 20 years on obesity, people like Dr. Beverly Chang have been directly involved in the reason for that. And so I can't thank people like her enough who have given their skills and abilities, their God-given brains to help figure out how we can tackle this problem of obesity and what treatments can be made to be effective in that battle. So an honor to talk to her. Of course, we'll have her back on the show at some point, but sat down with her and got a little interview with her, and I hope you enjoyed it. With that said, we're going to wrap it up on this special edition. I am extremely exhausted from the last few days. It's just been an absolute whirlwind, but wanted to bring you this show tonight because I didn't want to leave y'all hanging. I know that y'all have been excited to hear more and more about the week. And so I just wanted to give you that personal recap from a personal perspective on just how the week went, and just thank you once again for being such a important part of my own personal journey, but of course the best part of OnThePen. You all make it happen. Until next week, may the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Thank you for being here. We'll see you again next week.